My name is Daniel Rourke, and I've been a licensed private investigator in Chicago for nearly 20 years. I've seen the worst this city can spit out: infidelity, insurance fraud, missing hares, runaway teens. People lie for money, for nothing at all. You stop asking why after your first decade. You just follow the evidence and hope it points somewhere that still makes sense. When this case landed on my desk last Monday morning, I thought it would be more of the same. A woman called just after 8, said she was referred by a former client, wanted to meet in person. Her voice trembled, but not from fear, more from exhaustion, the kind that comes from replaying the same thought for too many nights. She gave her name as Elaine Mercer, said she needed help finding her brother, Detective Paul Mercer, retired from the Chicago PD 2 years ago. I knew the name, not personally, but enough. Mercer had worked homicide, made the papers a few times back in the early 2010s for a big corruption bust tied to a contractor ring. Later he'd gone quiet. Took early retirement after some departmental disagreements. Cops don't talk about those in detail, but you learn to read between the lines. Someone pushed where they weren't supposed to. Elaine showed up at my office on South Wabash just before 9. She was early 50s, smartly dressed, kept her handbag clutched tight like a life preserver. When she sat, she didn't waste time. "Paul's missing," she said. 2 weeks now. The police took a report but aren't doing anything. They say he's a grown man, retired, entitled to privacy. But he wouldn't just disappear. I nodded, took notes. "When's the last time you spoke to him?" "April 3rd, she said. "He called around 8 p.m., said he'd been following something. Sounded distracted, like he couldn't talk long. I asked what he meant, but he said he'd explain when we met Sunday. He never showed." "What was he following?" She hesitated. He didn't say exactly, just that it had to do with one of his old cases. Something about unfinished business. That phrase stuck. Old cops don't chase ghosts unless they think they missed something important, or someone made sure they did. I asked for a recent photo, his address, known associates. She produced a neat folder: driver's license copy, bank statements, phone logs. Paul had been living alone in a small apartment on the north side, Ravenswood. His last known activity, a debit charge at a gas station 2 days before he vanished. "Any enemies?" I asked. Her lips thinned. "Paul made plenty of those, Mr. Rourke, but that was years ago. He kept to himself now. He didn't even drink anymore. I promised to start that afternoon." She paid a retainer without flinching, cash counted out precisely. Before leaving, she paused at the door. "You'll find him, won't you?" "I'll find out what happened," I said. It's the only honest answer a PI can give. Paul Mercer's building was a narrow brick 3-story wedged between an abandoned bakery and a pawn shop. The buzzer didn't work, so I waited for a tenant carrying groceries and slipped in behind him. 3rd floor, end of the hall. The door was locked, no signs of forced entry. I knocked. Nothing. I picked it. Old habit, done cleanly. The apartment smelled faintly of dust and coffee. Sparse furniture. A stack of newspapers on the kitchen table, a corkboard with printouts and photos pinned in a chaotic cluster. I approached it carefully. Centered on the board was a name written in red marker: Henry Doyle. The name meant nothing to me. Around it, newspaper clippings, old homicide reports, missing persons, even property deeds. I recognized one headline from a decade ago: "Construction worker found dead in abandoned factory, no arrests made." Another pinned below: "Former city inspector questioned in kickback scheme." Mercer's notes circled the same few names across multiple sheets. Doyle's at the center. I took photos of the board for reference. His laptop sat open but password locked. Beside it, a spiral notebook, pages torn out unevenly near the end. One remaining entry, dated April 3rd. "Met contact at Canal Street. Promised files on Doyle case. Says someone's watching again. If anything happens, start there." No signature. Just the scrawled initials PM. I searched the rest of the apartment. No signs of struggle, no blood, no forced drawers. His wallet was gone, but a suitcase still sat in the closet. Whatever took him, or whatever he went chasing, happened quick. Before I left, I noticed something small: a half-finished mug of coffee on the counter, faint ring of mold around the rim. 2 weeks old? Maybe. He hadn't come back since. I spent the afternoon tracing the name Henry Doyle. The CPD archives didn't show any open warrant, but public records linked Doyle to a construction firm that folded after a bribery scandal in 2012. Same period Mercer worked homicide. Doyle himself had vanished that same year, presumed dead after a warehouse collapse near the river. The body never recovered. That caught my attention. If Mercer was looking into a dead man, maybe he'd found a reason to believe Doyle wasn't as dead as the paperwork said. At 6 p.m., I visited an old contact, Sergeant Ben Castro, who still worked out of the 21st District. We'd done each other favors back when my license was newer and his hair darker. He owed me a few. Paul Mercer, he said when I brought it up. Yeah, I remember him. Stubborn bastard. Got into it with internal affairs over some evidence mishandling thing. He quit before they could can him. Any idea what he was working on before he left? Castro scratched his chin. He kept digging into the Doyle case. Thought it tied into the corruption unit. Said he'd found missing files. No one listened. When Doyle's construction firm went under, a bunch of bodies disappeared, mostly undocumented laborers. Mercer thought someone was burying the truth, literally. Anyone ever confirm it? He gave a short laugh. Not officially, but a few guys on the force think Doyle faked his death, moved operations south, maybe St. Louis or Cincinnati. That's rumor. Though, what about Mercer's disappearance? Castro's smile vanished. You think it's connected? I think he thought it was. He leaned back. Careful, Danny. Doyle's name still opens doors you don't want to walk through. Some of those contractors ended up with federal friends. I thanked him and left before he could change his mind. Back in my car, parked under a flickering streetlight, I reviewed Mercer's phone logs. The last outgoing call before his disappearance was to a burner number. Unlisted, prepaid, last ping near the Canal Street rail yards, same location he'd mentioned in his note. It was nearly 9 by then, but I drove there anyway. The yards were half abandoned, old freight lines, empty loading bays, graffiti on rusted tankers. The air smelled of metal and rain. I walked the perimeter, flashlight in hand. Nothing at first but the usual urban decay, Ken's broken glass, the whisper of traffic from the viaduct above. Then, near an old service shed, I found something. A tire track pattern in the dirt, fresh compared to the rest. Thin grooves from a van likely unmarked, and beside it, half buried in mud, a police badge. Number filed off. I bagged it with a glove. No way to tell if it was Mercer's, but my gut said it mattered. The shed door was padlocked, but the chain was new, too new for a place like that. I noted the serial and left it intact. No sense tipping whoever had been here. By the time I got back to my office, the city had gone quiet. I poured myself a drink I didn't need and pinned the photos from Mercer's wall onto my own corkboard. His face stared back at me from the license copy, eyes sharp even in grayscale. A man who'd spent his career digging up rot, only to vanish in the same soil he'd disturbed. Something about the pattern of those clippings bothered me. Doyle's name repeated across different dates, different neighborhoods, but always near the river. Factories, warehouses, docks, every location tied to water access. If Doyle had faked his death, that's where he'd stay hidden. If Mercer was closing in, that's where he disappeared. At midnight, I got a text from an unknown number. No caller ID, just one line. You're 2 weeks late. Leave it alone. No signature, no punctuation. I looked out the window toward the street below. The usual Chicago nightlife hummed. Distant sirens, the train rumbling overhead, a drunk laughing into his phone. Nothing out of place. But for the first time in years, I locked the door to my office before turning out the lights. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark office with the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence, reading and rereading that text. There was no number attached, no return path. Just those 5 words, you're 2 weeks late. Leave it alone. That phrasing caught me. Not stop looking, or stay away. It implied whoever sent it expected someone, maybe Mercer, to show up earlier, which meant they thought I was him. I ran the number trace through a service I keep for clients who think their spouses are cheating. It bounced through 2 dummy accounts registered under defunct addresses in Indiana. Whoever sent it knew how to disappear. That didn't mean they were good at hiding in person, though. Everyone slipped somewhere. By 6 a.m., the city was waking. I grabbed black coffee from the diner across the street, the kind that tastes like burnt motor oil, and planned my next move. Canal Street was too exposed for daylight searching. Cops and scrap haulers moved through there in shifts. But the badge I'd found had to go somewhere. I called an old forensic tech I sometimes used, Marty Sloan. He'd been pushed out of the department 5 years back for skimming evidence fees. Now ran a consulting outfit that operated out of his garage. He owed me more favors than he'd ever repay. When I showed him the bag badge around 7, he whistled low, filed off clean. Whoever did this used acid, not a grinder. That's deliberate. Can you lift anything from it? He shrugged. Maybe trace prints if it wasn't soaked. Let me run it under fume. While he worked, I scanned his cluttered shelves, boxes labeled gunshot residue kits, ballistics, tapes 2014-2016. Sloan was messy, but he kept things because he couldn't stop seeing patterns. He was like me that way, obsessed, but too tired to call it passion anymore. 15 minutes later, he came back with a look I didn't like. Got partials. One smudged, others clean enough for partial match. Ooze. He hesitated. Database pinged to Paul Mercer. That wasn't possible. Mercer's badge had been turned in when he retired, but the acid etching told another story. Someone had stripped a badge and then handled it. Recently. You sure? I asked. He nodded. Positive. His prints were on file. This was touched by him. Week or 2 old, tops. So Mercer had been at that shed, or forced to touch the badge before it was dumped. Either way, it meant he was alive for at least part of those missing 2 weeks. I drove north toward Ravenswood again, this time to look at Mercer's neighborhood in daylight. The street was quiet, rows of older brick flats with iron fences and dog walkers. A couple of nosy residents eyed me as I walked the block. At the corner bodega, an older man's stocking shelves looked up when I flashed Mercer's photo. Yeah, seen him. Coffee and cigarettes every morning. Always exact change. When's the last time? Maybe 3 weeks ago. He was with somebody. Tall guy, gray coat. Didn't look like a friend. They argued outside. About what? The man shrugged. Didn't hear. The tall one left in a van. Black, no plates. That fit too neatly with the tracks at the rail yard. Before I left, the clerk added, Mercer looked spooked that day. Kept checking the street before he crossed. Never saw him again after that. By noon, I was sitting in my car near the 21st District again, waiting for Castro to clock out for lunch. When he finally stepped into the lot, I joined him with 2 coffees. I've got something you should see. He glanced around before accepting the cup. What's this about? I showed him the photo of the badge. His jaw tightened. Where'd you find that? Canal Street. Near a shed. Mercer's prints are on it. Jesus. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. You shouldn't have gone there, Danny. That place. Those warehouses. Half of them are owned by front companies. Guys who used to be union, now they're something else. Meaning Doyle's old crew never really left. They just changed paperwork. I told him about the text message. He cursed under his breath. You're poking something that doesn't like being poked. Maybe. But Mercer didn't vanish because he got bored of retirement. He took a sip of coffee, thinking, look, Mercer used to meet a CI went by Len. Worked maintenance on city contracts, probably knew where all the bodies were buried, sometimes literally. Last I heard, Len was running forklifts at a warehouse off Cermak and Cannelport. If anyone knew what Mercer was chasing, it'd be him. That was something. I thanked him and promised to keep his name out of it. The warehouse was a cavern of stacked pallets and diesel fumes. Forklifts buzzed like hornets between the aisles. I asked for Len, and the foreman, a wary man with tattooed knuckles, jerked a thumb toward the back. Len turned out to be early 60s, stocky, with grease, stained hands and a limp. He froze when I said Mercer's name. Not here, he muttered. Break room. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered. He closed the door before speaking. Paul came by a couple weeks back. Said he'd found Doyle. Alive. The words hung there. You believe him? I asked. Len shrugged. Didn't have reason not to. He showed me a photo grainy zoomed from a distance. Looked like Doyle standing outside an old feed mill near Joliet. Same face, older. Scar on the chin. Doyle used to have that. What did Mercer plan to do? Said he was meeting him. Wanted to record a confession, something about payoff ledgers. Told me if I didn't hear back, to burn his notes. Guess you found them instead. I watched Len's hands shake as he reached for a cigarette. You burned those notes. He hesitated, tried, but someone got there first. My locker was busted open next morning. Police? He gave a hollow laugh. No badge would waste time on an old cripple like me. Whoever it was, they took the folder and left a warning. Knife stuck in my chair. What did it say? He looked at me like I already knew. Leave it alone. By the time I left the warehouse, the sky had gone a dull gray. Chicago in April never decides what season it wants to be. Rain started up again as I hit the freeway south toward Joliet. The address of the feed mill came from an old property record I'd pulled while Len talked. Doyle's construction company had once leased several sites along the Des Plaines River. Most had been sold or condemned. This one was still listed under a shell corporation dissolved 3 years ago. Perfect place to disappear. The road narrowed to gravel past the industrial park. The feed mill rose ahead, 3 stories of corrugated metal, windows busted out, the main gate chained. I parked off the shoulder and approached on foot. Inside the fence, weeds had grown high. A few rusted trucks sat in the yard, their tires half buried in dirt. One still had a faded company logo, Riverview Construction. The front door gave with a soft creak. The air smelled of mold and oil. My flashlight beam cut across broken machinery, stacks of old lumber, graffiti from bored teenagers. Nothing living. Until I found the sleeping bag. It was tucked behind a pile of crates, flattened, damp, but recent. Inside were a few items. A thermos, flashlight, and a small spiral notebook. I flipped it open. Half the pages were blank. The rest were scrawled notes in Mercer's handwriting. Met Doyle today. Alive. Different name, Harland. Running something with River Docks. Promised files tomorrow night. Don't trust him. Then, below in smaller writing. If anyone finds this, tell Elaine I was right. I pocketed the notebook and checked the rest of the area. A dark stain spread across the floor near the far wall. Dried, brownish, too old to test easily. But the ground beneath looked disturbed, like someone had shoveled recently. Outside, thunder rolled over the river. On the drive back, I kept replaying what I'd read. Mercer met Doyle, or someone claiming to be him. The night before he disappeared. He left proof of life, and someone made sure it wouldn't reach anyone else. At a red light, I noticed a black van 3 cars back. Same model the bodega clerk described. It didn't pass when traffic moved. It followed. I took a few random turns through side streets, then pulled into a crowded gas station. The van rolled by slow, windows tinted. I couldn't see faces, just the shape of someone in the passenger seat holding a phone. When I merged back onto the main road, it was gone. Back at my office, I printed copies of Mercer's notes and hid the originals behind a ceiling panel. Years of cases have taught me one rule: never keep all your evidence in one place, and never assume you're the only one collecting it. At 11 p.m., as rain hammered the windows, my office phone rang. Landline, no caller ID. I answered. Silence at first, then a man's voice, low, rasped. You've got something that doesn't belong to you. Who is this? Pause. Then, the same one your missing cop was looking for. Click. The line went dead. I sat there with the receiver pressed to my ear long after the call ended, listening to the dial tone hum through the room. The voice had been steady, no threat, no rush, just quiet certainty. Whoever it was had been waiting for me to pick up. I replayed the line in my head. The same one your missing cop was looking for. It wasn't bragging, it was clarification. If the caller was Doyle, then Mercer had been right, he was alive. And now he knew someone else was chasing his trail. I checked the phone log, no number registered. Whoever called had used a digital relay or VoIP line. Clean, professional. I'd dealt with enough corporate surveillance cases to recognize it. Doyle, or whatever he was calling himself now, had resources. I poured a drink and didn't touch it. Just watched the ice melt while the rain tapped the window. When you work as long as I have, you learn the difference between fear and warning. Fear makes you reckless, warning makes you careful. I was well past fear. Morning crept in gray and heavy. I spent it tracing the name, Harland, through property and business records. Referenced it with Riverview Construction and found a new LC registered under Harland Group Logistics, a shipping outfit operating near the South Branch docks. Filed 6 months ago. Listed owner H. Doyle. That was as close to a confession as paper would give me. By noon I drove south. The docks sat between crumbling warehouses and river mud, the kind of place Chicago hides its unfinished stories. Freight containers stacked like tombs, cranes frozen mid-motion, the air thick with diesel and decay. Harland Group's office was a single prefab trailer beside the pier. The blinds were down. I knocked anyway. No answer. I circled the trailer and found fresh footprints in the mud. 2 sets, one heavier, one small. The door's lock had new scratch marks around it, like someone kept changing it. I tried the side window. It slid up without resistance. Inside, a desk, filing cabinets, a coffee maker still half full. On the corkboard above the desk hung shipping manifests stamped with dates less than a week old. Most went to the same recipient, West Shore Aggregate. That company hadn't existed in over a decade. I remembered it from the Mercer files. A dummy front in the Doyle corruption ring. So Doyle, or Harland, was still moving something under that name. Before I could dig deeper, a sound cut through the rain outside, a van door sliding shut. I froze, moved to the window. The same black van from the night before idled near the fence. 2 men stepped out, no uniforms, no markings. Both carried that same stiff, alert posture of men used to orders. I slid out the other side of the trailer and moved along the shipping containers, keeping low. One of them jimmied the door open with practiced ease. The other scanned the lot. When I reached the edge of the pier, I crouched behind a rusted forklift and waited. Voices carried faintly through the rain. Said he found Mercer's notebook here. Boss wants it back. No mistakes. A drawer slammed. The taller one cursed. It's gone. Someone got here first. Then, more quietly, maybe him. They searched another minute before leaving. The van drove off slow, no hurry, like they knew they'd be back. I waited until the sound faded before heading inside again. The desk drawers were empty now. They'd cleared anything left, but one thing they'd missed, a photo tucked behind a cabinet. It showed 2 men at a construction site, early 2000s by the look. One was younger Paul Mercer. The other, unmistakably, was Henry Doyle. Both smiling. Back in my car, I tried to breathe through the noise in my head. Mercer hadn't just been investigating Doyle. He'd known him, maybe partnered with him back when lines blurred between cases and favors. That changed everything. If Mercer had turned on Doyle later, maybe it wasn't out of duty. It was guilt, and if Doyle wanted his silence bought, that might explain the call. I needed leverage, something Doyle couldn't erase. So I went back to the one person left who still had a piece of Mercer's past, his sister. Elaine looked worse than before when she opened her apartment door, like she hadn't slept since our last meeting. Did you find him? Not yet, I said, but I found what he was chasing. Her living room was lined with old photo albums and a half-finished puzzle on the coffee table. Family photos, Paul in uniform, fishing trips, Christmas dinners. Ordinary lives frozen before the rot set in. I handed her the photo I'd found. You ever seen this man? She took a long look. That's Henry Doyle. Paul worked with him years ago. He said Doyle was charming but dangerous. The department used him as a liaison on city contracts. Then the corruption scandal broke and Doyle vanished. Paul said it was his fault, that he'd trusted him too much. Trusted him how? She hesitated. Never said. Just that Doyle had a way of making people believe in clean deals that weren't clean at all. Did Paul ever mention a place near Joliet? Her eyes flicked up. The feed mill. He went there the week before he disappeared. Said he was meeting an old friend to make things right. That confirmed what I already knew. But what she said next turned my stomach. After he retired, Paul started getting letters, she said. No return address, no signature. Just typewritten notes, phrases like "you owe me" or "the river remembers." He burned most of them, but I kept one. She fetched a small box from a drawer and handed me an envelope. Inside, a single sheet. "There's a debt that doesn't die just because the man does. We'll settle soon." The postmark was smudged, but the partial ZIP traced back to the 616A area, the South Branch docks. Doyle had been warning him for months. When I left her apartment, I felt the city pressing in. The hum of traffic, the sirens, the faint drizzle that coated everything in grime. Chicago doesn't keep its secrets, it just buries them under new ones. At my office, I pinned the new evidence to the board. Photo, note, map of the docks. Mercer's circle of obsession had become mine. Then I noticed something off. The office door lock scratched near the keyhole. Fresh, thin grooves like someone had tested it with a pick. I drew the blinds and moved to the desk drawer where I kept my backup piece. A .38 snub. Loaded, safety off. Someone had been here. I checked the files. Nothing missing. But the ceiling panel where I'd hidden Mercer's notebook was shifted slightly out of line. I climbed up. The notebook was gone. That meant only one thing. They'd been inside while I met Elaine. The phone rang again. Same numberless ID. This time I let it ring once before answering. "You should have listened," the voice said, calm again but colder. "You were warned." "What do you want?" "You've got until tonight to stop looking. After that, we stop asking." I said nothing. He continued. "Paul made the same mistake. Curiosity looks good on a cop until it gets him buried. Is he alive? Silence. Then, he was. That's all you need to know." Quick, the line went dead. I spent the next hour weighing my options. The logical move was to walk away, hand everything to the police. But I'd already seen how that story ends. They'd bury it. Call it a missing persons case gone cold. If Mercer had died for something, it deserved the light, even if it burned on the way up. So I called Castro again. "You ever hear of a company called West Shore Aggregate?" A pause. "Yeah, that's Doyle's old shell." "Why?" "I think he's still running freight under that name. Dock 14 at South Branch." "You sure about that?" "I'm sitting on his paperwork right now." He cursed softly. "All right, but don't go there alone. You hear me? I'll wait for you." I lied. By nightfall, I was back at the river. The air smelled of oil and wet iron. Dock 14 stretched into the water, floodlights flickering weakly overhead. A single van was parked near the pier, the same black one. Its engine idled. I crouched behind a container, heart steady, gun in hand. The rear doors opened. Two men dragged something heavy wrapped in tarp toward the edge. When they lifted it, the tarp slipped just enough for me to see a face. Gray hair. Familiar jawline. I moved before thinking. Shouting, "Police!" "Drop it." Reflex from a life ago. They froze. One drew a gun, firing wild. I hit the ground behind the container as bullets sparked off metal. The second man ran toward the van. I fired once, aiming for the tires. Missed. The van roared to life and tore off down the pier, splashing mud as it went. When I got up, the dock was empty. No Mercer, no shooter, just rain swallowing the sound. On the ground, near where the tarp had been, lay a single photograph, wet, curling at the edges. It showed Mercer standing beside Doyle again, older this time, both wearing hard hats at a construction site. The caption scribbled on the back read, "Partnership never dies." I drove all night. Didn't matter where, northwest, anywhere with distance between me and that dock. The sound of those gunshots wouldn't leave. Every flash behind my eyes replayed Mercer's face, slack and gray before the rain took it away. At 3 a.m., I pulled into a diner off I-55. A waitress poured coffee without asking. It was the kind of place that saw every kind of desperation but didn't judge it. I sat there until dawn turned the windows pale and greasy. I'd been a private investigator long enough to know when a case stops being about money or reputation. This wasn't about a missing cop anymore. It was about who wanted him missing and how deep the hole went. I still had Doyle's trail through Harland Group Logistics. I still had that photo with the caption, "Partnership never dies." Whoever wrote it wanted to remind someone of loyalty, or maybe guilt. When the city woke, I went back. At 9 sharp, I was in Castro's office at the 21st. He looked at me like a man staring at his own bad decisions. "You look like hell." "Yeah," I said. "And you're about to join me there." I put the photograph on his desk. He flinched before picking it up. "Where'd you get this?" "Doc 14. 2 men dumping a body. Paul Mercer. Doyle's alive." He stared at me for a long moment, jaw tightening. "You sure it was Mercer?" "As sure as I'm sitting here." Castro leaned back, rubbing his temple. "Goddamn it. I told you to stay out of it." "Yeah, and that worked out great for Mercer." He gave a humorless laugh. "You think you're the first to dig at this?" "You're just the first still breathing." "What's Doyle into?" He didn't answer. So I leaned forward. "You said those docks were owned by front companies. Which ones?" "Doesn't matter. They're all dead names. Harlan Group's not." That caught him. His eyes flicked to the door before lowering his voice. "You don't understand. Doyle wasn't just bribing city inspectors. He was running disposal contracts. Waste, concrete, dredging. Only it wasn't waste going into the river." I waited. "Bodies, Danny. The ones that didn't make the news. Homeless, day laborers, anyone without a next of kin. He buried them and filled dirt for construction projects. Mercer found proof 10 years ago, tried to reopen the cases. But Doyle had friends, real ones. Federal. The kind that make evidence disappear. And now he's back." Castro nodded slowly. "The river gives up what it wants. Maybe Doyle thinks someone's coming for him again." "He already did," I said. "Paul tried." Castro's face sagged. "Then you'd better hope you're smarter than he was." He slid an envelope across the desk. Inside were photocopies, old case reports marked confidential. "Those never left this building," he said. "I'm not supposed to have them?" "You sure you want me to?" "No," he said, "but you already do." Back in my office, I spread the files out. The earliest dated 2010, the year of the construction scandal. Dozens of missing persons, all men employed under temporary contracts with Doyle's firms. None officially linked. Each case had the same note stamped in the margin, "No leads." Mercer had highlighted them in red pen. Next to 3 names, he'd written one word: River. The file at the bottom was thicker inside. A map of the South Branch flood zones, with markings near the old Harlan site, the same dock I'd been to. Mercer had drawn small X along the shoreline, labeled soil voids. That was detective talk for disturbed ground. He'd found burial sites. I was still studying the map when a knock came at the door. Not the hesitant kind, heavy, official. I slid the files into a drawer and answered. 2 men stood there, one in a dark coat, the other in a cheap suit that screamed, "Federal, Mr. Rourke." Depends who's asking. They flashed IDs too quick to read. "Would like to ask a few questions regarding a missing persons investigation. Mind if we come in?" I stepped aside, but not far. The older one took the lead. "You were hired by Elaine Mercer." "That's right." "When's the last time you spoke to her?" "Yesterday morning." He nodded. "She's missing." The words landed harder than I expected. "She called 911 around 10 p.m., he continued. "Said she thought someone was outside her apartment. By the time units arrived, she was gone. Door forced from the inside." I said nothing. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" "No," I said. "But I know someone who would." They watched me like cats with a mouse, waiting for me to twitch. The younger one said, "You should let this go, Mr. Rourke. For your own sake." "Funny," I said. "That line's getting popular lately." They didn't smile. The older man placed a card on my desk. "If you find anything, you call us first. Don't go playing hero. Heroes don't make it in this city." When they left, I waited a full minute before checking the hallway. Empty, but I knew the move. They'd be watching. I packed the essentials: gun, files, recorder, flask. Then I took the back stairs. If Doyle had taken Elaine, he was tightening the net. She must have had something he wanted. Maybe the letter she showed me. Maybe just her connection to Paul. Either way, he was cleaning up. I drove toward the outskirts where the city thins into rail and factory sprawl. The rain had stopped, but the streets still glistened like old scars. I reached the feed mill again by late afternoon. It looked the same, empty, hollow, but the air felt different. Quiet in a way cities never are. Inside, I found new footprints in the dust, 2 sets, and something else, a faint hum, electrical. I followed it to the back office. A generator sat in the corner, cables running to a portable freezer chest. My stomach knotted before I even opened it. Inside were stacks of concrete core samples, each tagged with coordinates and dates. Mercer's handwriting again. He'd been collecting proof. Physical evidence of the bodies buried under Doyle's construction sites. He'd been building a case. I snapped photos, then pulled out one core. The center showed dark staining, organic, maybe bone fragment, enough for a lab to test, if I lived that long. That's when I heard the crunch of gravel outside. I killed the generator, cut the flashlight. Through a gap in the wall, headlights swept across the yard. 2 vehicles this time. Men got out. Voices. Low. Check the back, one said. I slipped into the shadows and moved toward the loading ramp. My car was parked down the slope, too far. I'd have to run for it. A beam of light caught the far wall as one man entered. He's been here. Lights were on. Another voice, closer now. Then he's still here. I waited until they split, one circling left, the other down the main aisle, then bolted for the door. My boots hit the gravel just as a shout went up. Hey! A gunshot cracked. Stone chips sprayed my face. I dove behind a rusted truck and crawled through the grass toward the fence. Another shot. Then a voice I recognized. Danny, stop running. Doyle. Calm, like the phone call. You're not built for this anymore, he said, somewhere beyond the dark. Neither was Mercer. I didn't answer. I reached the fence, slipped through a gap, and kept low until I hit the main road. Cars passed now and then, headlights breaking the dark. I didn't stop until I'd put 3 miles between us. By the time I reached my office again, dawn was threatening. My clothes were streaked with mud, and every muscle in my body buzzed with adrenaline and exhaustion. The office door was open. Just a crack. I raised the .38, pushed it in. No one there. The light from the hallway caught something on my desk. A manila envelope. Inside a photo of Elaine Mercer, eyes closed, sitting upright in a chair. Her wrists bound, mouth tape. Behind her, a cinder block wall painted with a red mark, an X, no note, no demand. Just coordinates written on the back. When I looked them up, my blood went cold. They led to a property near Calumet River, registered to, of course, Harlan Group Logistics. I sat there a long time staring at the coordinates. Every line I'd crossed to get here came back to one question. What would Mercer have done if the roles were reversed? I already knew the answer. I loaded the gun, pocketed the flask, and took one last look at the city map. The river wound through it like a vein. Black, slick, endless. If Doyle wanted to finish what he started, he'd have to see me face to face. I locked the office behind me and stepped into the gray light. By the time I reached Calumet, the morning had already burned off its gray. The river caught the sunlight like oil, a rainbow shimmer on rot. I parked a few blocks from the coordinates Doyle had left, an industrial stretch of warehouses and gravel lots, all half abandoned, all with the same blind windows. Harlan Group's listed property sat behind a chain, link gate marked, IRZADNTRONY. Nobody authorized had been here in a while. The padlock was new, though. Doyle had been expecting company. I cut it and slipped through. The address pointed to a long concrete building with rusted siding and a row of ventilation stacks, bleeding steam into the sky. A generator hummed somewhere inside, steady as a heartbeat. The smell hit first, bleach and stagnant water. Then a faint echo like metal scraping on metal. I held the .38 low and moved slow. Every step on the damp floor sounded too loud. Inside, the warehouse opened into a wide hall lined with plastic sheeting, the kind they use for clean rooms or crime scenes. Pale light filtered through gaps in the panels, ghostly and cold. Halfway down, I found a folding chair. Elaine Mercer sat tied to it, duct tape across her mouth, wrists bound with zip ties. Her eyes snapped open when she saw me. I checked the corners first. No movement. Then I knelt, cut her free. She gasped, voice cracked raw. He's still here. Doyle. She nodded, trembling. He said you'd come. Said he needed all of us in one place. Did he hurt you? She shook her head. Not yet. I helped her stand. We're leaving. But when we reached the door, it slammed shut from the outside. The generator's hum deepened, and the overhead lights flickered on. A voice came from the intercom. Low, measured, the same tone that had haunted my phone for days. Daniel Rourke. Finally, I turned gun up. Show yourself. Not yet, Dole said. You've been busy. Digging where a smarter man would have stopped. Where's Mercer? He gave a quiet chuckle. Closer than you think. The lights brightened. Behind the plastic sheeting, I saw shapes. Rows of concrete cores stacked neatly on metal tables, tagged with coordinates. Mercer's work, arranged like trophies. Doyle continued. Calm as expose me, said he had proof. But he forgot who built the foundation he stood on. What did you do to him? What he asked for? The sheeting rustled behind us. I spun, gun raised, nothing. Just the whisper of air moving through vents. Then Doyle stepped through the light. Older, heavier, but unmistakable. The same eyes from those photos. Calculating, unhurried. He wore a dark coat flecked with concrete dust. Don't bother, he said, nodding to the gun. If I wanted you dead, you'd have stayed that way. Then what do you want? Closure? He smiled faintly. You're chasing ghosts, Danny. Mercer, me, the river. It's all the same story. You think uncovering what's buried makes you clean. It just makes you next. He gestured toward the tables. Go on. Look, you wanted the truth. Elaine clutched my arm. Don't, she whispered. But I stepped forward anyway. The cores weren't just samples. They'd been split open. Inside each, sealed in the concrete, were fragments of bone. Dozens of them. Mercer had dug these up himself. Doyle watched me. He thought he could save them. That's what good men tell themselves. But once you pour concrete over a secret, you can't unmake it. You can only add another layer. I felt my stomach twist. You killed him, he shrugged. I kept him from becoming what he hated. Same as I'll do for you. I raised the gun. You're done. He didn't flinch. You think shooting me will change anything? I built this city's bones, Danny. The cops, the contractors, the politicians, they all stand on my concrete. You dig too deep, and the whole thing collapses. He turned slightly toward Elaine. Ask her. She knows what her brother became before the end. She froze. Don't listen to him. Doyle smiled. Paul made deals. Used my men to bury his own mistakes. Then he tried to repent. Everyone wants to repent eventually. I looked at her. That true? Tears welled. He didn't know how deep it went. Doyle stepped closer. Now you do. Walk away and I'll let you both live. You can write your reports, burn your notes. Pretend this was another dead-end case. The hum of the generator filled the silence. I should have taken the deal, but something in his voice, soft, almost kind, made it clear he was lying. The kind of lie you tell before pulling the trigger. I fired first. The bullet caught him in the shoulder. He staggered, cursed, then ducked behind a support beam. The lights flickered again. Elaine screamed. I pulled her toward the far exit as gunfire cracked behind us. Concrete dust rained from the ceiling. Keep low, I said, pushing her ahead. We burst into a narrow hallway lined with pipes. Steam hissed from a vent. The door at the end was chained, padlocked. I fired twice, the lock snapped. Outside, the sunlight was blinding. We ran until we hit the car. Elaine collapsed in the passenger seat, shaking. He's not dead, I know. I sped north, heart hammering, waiting for pursuit. None came. The rearview mirror stayed empty. For a long time, we said nothing. Just the sound of the road and her shallow breathing. Finally, she spoke. What now? We'll go public. News outlets, state investigators. Someone will listen. They won't. Her voice broke. He owns them. Then we find someone who doesn't. We spent the rest of the day hiding in a motel near Cicero. Curtains drawn, TV on low, trying to feel invisible. I cleaned the gun, reloaded. Elaine sat by the window, staring at the parking lot like she expected Doyle's van to appear. That night, I called Marty Sloan. Told him to meet me at his garage, bring whatever lab gear he had left. I still had one of the core samples from the feed mill. If it tested positive for human remains, it would be enough to drag the whole thing into daylight. When we got there, Sloan was waiting with coffee and nervous eyes. Jesus, Danny, you look like you crawled out of the river. Not far off, I said. He took the sample, cut it open carefully. Under magnification, the truth came out, a fragment of a human tooth embedded deep. That's your smoking gun, he said softly. Whoever this belongs to, they didn't die of natural causes. I felt something shift inside me, a mix of relief and dread. Proof was a strange comfort. It didn't fix anything, it just gave your fear a shape. Can you document it? I asked. He nodded. I'll prep a report tonight. When we stepped outside, the night was thick and still. Streetlights buzzed over empty asphalt. Elaine waited in the car. That's when I saw it. The reflection of headlights at the far end of the block. A van. I didn't hesitate. Get down. Glass exploded. Sloan dropped instantly, blood blooming across his chest. I fired twice toward the lights, then dragged Elaine behind the car. Tires screeched. The van reversed fast, disappeared around the corner. I knelt beside Sloan, pressed my hand to the wound, but there was too much blood. He looked up once, eyes unfocused. They never stop, he whispered. Then nothing. Elaine sobbed quietly beside me. I stared at the spreading pool beneath him, the proof he'd just died for. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have heard the shots. I grabbed the sample and Sloan's recorder, stuffed them into my coat. When the cruisers arrived, I'd be the story they wrote. Private investigator kills associate in dispute. Doyle didn't need to kill me, he just needed me erased. We ran. By the time we reached the river again, the sky was bruised with early dawn. The city looked like it was holding its breath. Elaine leaned against the guardrail, shaking. There's nowhere left to go. Then we stopped running. I pulled out the recorder, hit play. Sloan's voice crackled. Sample 47A. Organic matter confirmed. Likely human origin. Coordinates correspond to Calumet site. Recommend forensic excavation. I saved the file to a thumb drive, then to another. You trust anyone in the press? I asked. She thought a moment. Maybe one. Tribune. He covered Paul's corruption case years ago. Then we send him everything. We stood there in the wind, the river below us dark and endless. Somewhere out there. Doyle still moved, bleeding, angry, untouchable. But for the first time since this started, I had something he couldn't bury. Behind us, a car engine started. Elaine turned. Danny. I raised the gun again, heart steady. This wasn't over. We didn't have time to think. The car idling behind us crept forward, headlights dimmed, the slow confidence of someone who already owned the night. I pulled Elaine behind the guardrail. Stay down. The engine revved once, then cut. Doors opened, 2 slams, one on each side. Footsteps on gravel, measured, deliberate. Rourke, a voice called. Not Doyle's this time. Younger. Smoother. Let's not make this any messier than it needs to be. I shouted back. Tell Doyle he should have done this himself. A pause, then a dry laugh. He's resting. You hurt him. Not many people can say that. They split, one moving left, one right. I could hear the scrape of shoes against concrete. They were trained, not street muscle. Doyle had leveled up since his contractor days. I motioned to Elaine run on my signal. When the first shadow rounded the rail, I fired. The echo ripped down the riverbank, sending gulls scattering. The man fell hard, his gun clattering across asphalt. The second one fired back, missed wide. Elaine bolted for the stairwell that led up toward the bridge. I covered her, then followed, lungs burning. By the time we reached the overpass, the street behind us was flashing blue and red. Sirens again, but not for us this time. Someone had called the earlier shooting. We melted into the stream of cars inching through the interchange, blending with the noise. Doyle's men didn't follow. We holed up at an hourly motel on Archer Avenue. The kind of place that asks for cash and forgets your face. I locked the door, shoved a chair under the handle, and finally let myself breathe. Elaine sat on the bed, staring at her hands. You killed him, she said quietly. He was going to kill us, she nodded, eyes distant. They'll send more. I know. I poured 2 plastic cups of cheap whiskey from the bottle by the sink. My hands shook enough to spill half. I handed her one anyway, and it helps for about 5 minutes. We sat in silence. Rain started again outside, soft and endless. Chicago's lullaby. "You really think someone at the Tribune will run it?" she asked. "They might not. But if we send it to everyone, someone will. And if they don't." I looked at the recorder on the table. Then at least the truth's on tape. Doyle can kill people, not stories. Her laugh was small, bitter. "You sound like Paul. Guess we both got the same flaw." At dawn, I slipped out to get supplies. Burner phones, food, gas. The city felt heavier, like every brick knew what I'd done. On my way back, I spotted a sedan tailing me. Too tidy, too patient. I pulled into an alley, watched the mirrors. When it passed, I caught the license plate, government tags. So the feds were back in play. Either Doyle had bought them, or they were cleaning up his mess. When I returned to the motel, the door was open. Not broken, open. Inside, the bed was empty, sheets rumpled, her cup on the floor. No sign of struggle, no blood. Just gone. On the dresser sat a note written in her careful hand. He called, said he'd stop if I came. "I couldn't let you die, too." The coordinates below pointed back to the docks. I wanted to walk away. Every instinct screamed it. I'd done my job, found the truth, proved the crimes. But it wasn't about a paycheck anymore. It hadn't been for days. So I loaded the gun again, pocketed the recorder, and drove. The Calumet site looked different this time. The gate hung open. The hum of the generator was gone. Silence wrapped the air tight, heavy with rain. I moved through the main hall, flashlight slicing across the concrete tables. The cores were gone. Every tag, every note erased. Only wet rings where they'd sat remained. Someone had cleaned house. I followed the corridor toward the sound of dripping water. It led to a freight elevator shaft. Doors pried open, cables descending into darkness. A faint light flickered below. The controls were dead, so I climbed. Halfway down, the smell hit, rust and decay at the bottom. A sublevel opened into what looked like an old storage floor, half flooded. And there they were. Rows of concrete columns, chest high, each with a number painted in red. The river had seeped in over time, turning the floor into a shallow graveyard of water and cement. Elaine sat tied to a chair near the center. Doyle stood beside her, left arm in a sling. "Always the hero," he said, voice echoing against the walls. "You could have walked away." "I still might," I said. "After I finish this." He smirked. "You think killing me matters? You think it'll stop any of this? You're chasing one man in a system built from 1,000 just like me." "Maybe," I said. "But you're the one standing in front of me." He raised a small remote, thumb over the button. "You fire that gun, this place goes under. The pilings are wired with enough charge to turn us into part of the foundation. Paul helped install them, before he decided to get righteous." Elaine's eyes met mine. "He's bluffing," she mouthed. I couldn't tell. Doyle continued, almost tender. "You're not so different, Rourke. You follow the trail, tell yourself it's about justice. But really, it's about control. About being the one who decides which truth gets buried." He lowered the remote slightly, tilting his head. "So which one are you? The man who digs, or the one who builds over what he finds?" The floor creaked under us. Water lapped higher. I took one slow step forward, gun raised. "Let her go," he smiled. "I did once. Her brother too. But they never stay gone." Then he pressed the button. The explosion wasn't cinematic. Just a deep, collapsing thud, like the earth exhaling. The floor buckled, water surged from the far wall. I dove, cutting Elaine's restraints as concrete dust filled the air. We ran toward the elevator shaft as steel groaned and beams snapped overhead. The water chased us, cold, relentless. I pushed her upward, climbing behind. Halfway up, Doyle's voice echoed faintly from below, drowned by the rush. "You can't bury a builder, Danny. I am the foundation." Then the ceiling gave. I hauled Elaine through the last stretch, collapsing onto the floor above as the shaft filled beneath us. The roar faded to a muffled silence. The sublevel was gone, swallowed by the river's return. We lay there coughing, soaked in silt. She whispered, "Is he dead?" I stared down into the black water. He built his own tomb. We made it outside just as sirens lit the horizon. Fire crews, patrol cars, men shouting into radios. A patrolman waved us away from the perimeter. "What happened in there?" he asked. "Gas leak," I said. "You'll find the paperwork." He nodded like he didn't want to know more. They took Elaine to an ambulance. She looked back once, eyes hollow. "What now?" "Go somewhere quiet," I said. "Somewhere they don't pour concrete. And you got one last thing to finish." By noon I was back in my office. The window blinds half drawn, the city sirens distant as heartbeat. I cleaned the gun, then placed the recorder on the desk. Sloane's final report still sat inside, time-stamped and undeniable. I added my own voice over it. "This is Daniel Rourke, Private Investigator, License 4819. Case file Mercer Doyle closed. Evidence human remains confirmed, responsible parties deceased or untraceable. Motive control through construction corruption. Multiple homicides under industrial cover. Statement ends." I saved it to a dozen encrypted drives. Sent copies to the Tribune, the Sun-Times, a federal inbox that wouldn't know what to do with it. Then I sat back and waited. The city outside went about its day. Horns, voices, a life that forgets fast. Somewhere beneath it all, Doyle's empire was sinking inch by inch into the mud. Maybe the river finally took something back. Or maybe it just made room for the next man in line. The knock at the door came just before dusk. Light, polite. I almost didn't answer, but old habits die slower than people. When I opened it, a young man in a cheap suit stood there. Federal badge. "No surprise, Mr. Rourke," he said. "We received your recordings." That was the idea. He smiled, small and humorless. "You've made quite a mess. Clean it up then." He glanced past me, eyes on the corkboard of photos. "You know, you could have sold this. Walked away rich. Not my kind of wealth." He studied me a beat longer. "There's still fallout coming. Bodies, investigations. Don't be in town when it hits." Then he turned and left. I watched him go until the street swallowed him. I poured a drink, sat by the window. The river glinted in the distance, quiet now. Elaine would be gone by nightfall. I hoped somewhere far from docks and ghosts. I raised the glass to the skyline. Chicago never stops rebuilding itself. It buries the old beneath the new, layer after layer, until no one remembers what's underneath. That's how cities survive. And maybe, for the first time, I understood Doyle's last words. You can't bury a builder, but you can make damn sure his name doesn't stay on the blueprint. I thought that was the end. Doyle buried, Elaine safe, files sent. I let myself believe it for a week, maybe two. The city went quiet, as if it wanted to move on. The papers ran a few polite pieces about an industrial accident on the Calumet, and then nothing. No follow-ups, no questions. Just another footnote in Chicago's long history of things not officially happening. The story died faster than the people in it. But I couldn't. I still woke at 3 every morning, hearing the echo of Doyle's voice under the water, the sound of steel collapsing. I'd sit in the dark office, watch the light crawl through the blinds, and tell myself the case was closed. Then I'd open the file again anyway. One night, a week after the explosion, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. A woman's voice came through. Calm official. "Mr. Rourke, this is Special Agent Maren Steele, Federal Bureau of Investigation. We need to discuss your recordings." "Then discuss? In person," she said. "Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., Federal Building, Dearborn Street." The line went dead before I could ask anything. I didn't sleep. Spent the night at the desk, nursing cold coffee, watching headlights smear across the wall. By dawn, I'd convinced myself it was legitimate. The message had come through a secure channel. At 10 sharp, I was at the front desk of the Federal Building. The clerk found no record of an agent Steeple. That's when I knew. When I got back to my car, a note was tucked under the wiper. Typed same Courier font Doyle had used before. "You can't build over the truth forever." No signature. By afternoon, the paranoia stopped being theoretical. A sedan followed me from the loop down to Wabash, turned when I turned. I parked outside a corner store, waited. The car idled across the street for 20 seconds, then rolled on. I started keeping the .38 on my desk again. Not because I planned to use it, because I didn't trust myself not to need to. 2 days later, Elaine called from an unlisted number. "Danny, it's me." Her voice sounded clearer, steadier. "You okay?" I asked. "For now. I'm in Michigan, staying with a friend." "They haven't found me." Good. She hesitated. You shouldn't have sent those files. That's what Mercer died for.
I know.
But there are people higher than Doyle. Paul mentioned names. Contractors tied to federal grants, politicians laundering bids through phantom firms. Doyle was just their concrete. You didn't break the structure. You just cracked the top layer. Then who's left? The ones who never sign anything, she said softly. The ones who build the next city before the old one's even finished. The line clicked once. I thought we'd lost connection. Then a new voice cut in rough male. Rourke. Who is this? Doesn't matter. She's safe. You're not. Click. The call dropped. After that, I stopped answering the phone. The nights blurred. I'd hear footsteps in the stairwell outside my office, doors creaking that shouldn't. Twice I found the lock scraped again, once replaced entirely. Whoever was playing this game didn't want me dead yet. Just watched. Waited for me to blink first. So I did what I'd always done. I started digging again. If Doyle was part of something bigger, it would live in contracts, not corpses. Paper lasts longer than people. I spent 3 days in the county archives, bribing a clerk with whiskey to pull old procurement ledgers. There it was, Harland Group, folded into Midwest Aggregate Solutions, then Union Works Development. All shell companies under the same parent LLC, registered to a law firm downtown. The name on the articles of incorporation Steele and Bracken. Steele. I drove there that evening. The building sat polished in glass, bright on Wacker Drive. Receptionist smiled professionally when I gave my name. Do you have an appointment with Agent Steele? Not agent, I said. Attorney. Her smile didn't waver. We have no one by that name. Of course, they didn't. When I turned to leave, she added, Mr. Rourke, someone left this for you. She handed me an envelope. Inside, a single Polaroid, my office door, taken from across the street. Last night, I didn't go home. Instead, I drove north to a cheap motel near O'Hare, room paid in cash. I sat on the bed staring at the photo, trying to decide what kind of man still fights when the fight's already over. That's when the TV flickered on by itself. Old tube set, static crawling the screen before the image sharpened. Security footage. My office, time-stamped an hour earlier. 2 men in dark coats searching drawers, one holding a small recorder. My recorder. The camera panned blurry but clear enough. They looked straight into the lens before the feed cut. I yanked the plug from the wall. The screen went black. Someone wanted me to see it. At dawn, I drove to the Tribune building, walked straight past the front desk, found the one journalist Elaine had mentioned, Tom Harker, an old-school reporter who'd once taken a bribe and refused it loudly enough to lose a promotion. He looked up from his desk like he'd been expecting me. Rourke, he said, you look like a man still standing in a building that already fell. Hair to make sure it hits the ground properly, I said, handing him the drives. Everything. Doyle, Mercer, the bodies, the contracts. He slid one into his laptop, eyes scanning fast. Jesus, you realize what you're giving me? Yeah. And you realize they'll come for you too. He gave a tired grin. That's the job. I nodded once and left. No signatures, no witnesses. Just trust the rarest currency left. For 3 days I waited. No headlines, no arrests. Then, on the 4th morning, the Tribune ran a single-column story on page 12, City Investigation into Decade. Old construction fraud reopened. No names, no bodies. Just that. Below it, an obituary, Thomas Harker, 59, passed suddenly at his home Monday evening. Heart failure, it said. I stared at the print until the words bled together. That night, I packed what I could fit into one duffel. Gun, flask, spare license. Left the rest. Before locking the office, I took one last look at the corkboard. Mercer's photo, Doyle's map, Elaine's note. I tore them down one by one, fed them into the trash bin. Lit a match. The flames caught slow, orange and whispering. When it was done, I sat on the floor, the room dim except for the glow from the streetlight through the blinds. The air smelled of smoke and old paper. I thought about Mercer, his stubbornness, his guilt, about Doyle, his twisted sense of permanence, about Elaine, maybe finally safe somewhere that doesn't echo, and about me, sitting in a room full of ashes, still pretending any of it made a difference. The truth doesn't save people. It just changes what haunts them. Before dawn, I left Chicago, drove south until the skyline shrank to gray memory. Somewhere near Kankakee, I pulled over, rolled down the window, and listened. Nothing but wind through grass and the far whistle of a train. I poured the last of Sloane's whiskey into the dirt for him, for Mercer, maybe for me. Then I opened the glove box. Inside, a single envelope I hadn't packed. Plain unmarked. I don't remember putting it there. I tore it open. A photograph again, new, crisp. Me at the gas station that morning, head turned toward the camera. On the back, the same typed words. You can't build over the truth forever. No signature, just like before. I sat there a long time, watching the sunrise paint the horizon in rust. I should have felt fear. Instead, I felt what Mercer must have. Acceptance. Some things don't end. They just keep changing shape, like concrete poured over the same ground again and again. Every generation thinking it's building something new, never realizing the foundation was never cleared. Chicago will keep growing. Doyle's name will fade, but his concrete will hold. And beneath it, the bones he left, the stories people like me tried to tell, will keep the city standing, even if no one ever knows. Maybe that's the best any of us can do, build something that lasts, even if it's made of ghosts. I started the car, turned north, and merged back toward the city. The road shimmered ahead, endless and familiar. Behind me, the river slept and the skyline waited, tall, indifferent, unbroken.